What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, shout out to the brother Solomon for the $50 donation via the Cash App. Salute to you for showing love to Too Raw for TV. Now, he actually requested this video on Thursday, but I had to take my time and make some updates to my all-time list. So I'm sorry it took so long for me to actually to do this video request. All right, so you may remember over the past couple of months, actually, I have been doing a requested series of an ever-expanding list of top NBA players historically and their weaknesses as far as their actual, games or whatever. And first was my top 10. Then expanded to top 20, then top 30, and now it's top 40, but I'm not doing it in every video. In this particular video, he requested that I name my top 31 to 40 all-time players and their weaknesses, at least how I perceive them. Now, some people are obviously, if they look back at the videos, and I think I should make a playlist of these videos now that I think about it, if I haven't already. They're going to have issues with where I rank certain players, right? So it is what it is, But at number 31, I have John Havlicek, who, of course, played from 1962 to 1978. His entire 16-year career was with the Boston Celtics. Hall of Fame player. He's still the all-time leading scorer for the Boston Celtics. I believe he was an 8-time NBA champion. And he was not the first sixth man in NBA history. That was Frank Ramsey. But he was the guy who I would say is arguably the greatest sixth man. Now, some people might say Robert Horry. I mean, that's debatable. Weaknesses. Well, I would say that the main weakness I think of when it comes to John Havlicek is that despite the fact that he had a reputation for being a clutch performer, especially as he started coming of age as the leader of the Celtics in the 1970s, at one point, and still at times even then, he could get into shooting slumps. He only shot like 44% for his career, which was somewhat average for the time that he played in, but there's 43.9%. He could go into shooting slumps. He's streaky. Okay, he might have a game where he might go, let's just say, 12 for 18. And he's knocking down all his shots. Then he might have a game the very next time they play where he goes 2 of 14. Then he might have a game where he goes, 9 for 24. That was Hondo. He did not come into the NBA as a great scorer. He worked himself into being a great scorer. He was more of a defensive specialist. And he worked to become an all-around player. He improved his playmaking. He improved his rebounding. He was already a gifted athlete who was a guy, like I said before, who had defensive prowess, but he expanded his game so much to the point where he worked himself and he worked his way into becoming an all-star, a legit all-star. You know what I'm saying? So talent, if it's there, definitely can be cultivated by hard work. And even if you're not a superstar, you can maximize your potential with hard work and perseverance. Man, it's so hard for me to think about anything else with Hondo as far as the weakness is concerned. Yeah. I really just off the top of my head, I mean, because he gave you everything for as a teammate. Like he gave you everything. He gave you all this, so he gave it all out in the court. He was a hustler out there in the court. Uh, he gave you he left everything out there on the floor every single night. So it's hard for me to say really anything. He was pretty much an Iron Man. He played in 1,270 games in 16 years. So I can't say he was injury prone. He wasn't small for a small forward for his era. He wasn't the fastest guy. I guess that's about it. That's about it. Maybe there's something I'm forgetting, but anyway. At number 32, I have Kevin Durant. And yeah, I have him way down there. I don't have him way up there with Stephen A. Smith having him at number 10 all time or whatever the hell he does. I don't give him the credit for those championships that other people give him. I just don't. And what really sealed it for me was his lack of success in the NBA since he left the Warriors. Now, if he somehow leads the Rockets to a championship, then I'll recalibrate things and have to probably push him up a lot more. You know what I'm saying? But right now, the way he's failed epically since leaving the Warriors, nope, just can't do it. Now, when it comes to Kevin Durant, his weaknesses. For all of the talk about his skill, and he is a very skilled player for his size, and we've never seen a guy that tall be that fluid as far as his shooting mechanics and his ball handling. We really haven't seen that with a guy like KD, but still, you got to say he's 6'11". You know what I'm saying? He's still 6'11", 7 feet in shoes. When you're that tall, you're going to still be susceptible to, especially when a little guard or a comparatively little guard, a comparatively small guard gets into your space, you're going to be prone to having the ball stolen from you. You're going to be prone to deflections and crap like that. You know what I'm saying? And it seems like ever since the Achilles rupture, especially, KD has become a lot more turnover prone. And whenever he's played against good to great defense, yeah, KD's become a lot more turnover prone in his career. So, you have that. He's not the greatest rebounder. He was not a great shot blocker. He's not a great defender, but he's not bad, at least not in his prime. But he wasn't good or great, in my opinion. His passing ability got better and improved with the Warriors, but he was never a great passer. Really, his strong suit is his offensive exploits, his unbelievable offensive game and efficiency. I can't help but get the impression that a guy like KD, if it were not for those championships with the Golden State Warriors, you would almost be inclined to say that his career was a bit of a disappointment. So I don't know. But yeah, KD, those are pretty much the main weaknesses I can think of with a guy like him. I'm trying to think of anything else I want to say about him. He's not a leader. Clearly, that's another thing. He's not a leader. And sometimes I don't think that KD gives it all out there. I think he's content with going out there, playing his role, and calling it a day. Number 33, I got Dwyane Wade. Now, I know that's probably like at least 10 spaces lower than where a lot of people have Dwyane Wade. But you know why I have Dwyane Wade lower? I'm going to tell you why I have him lower. Because I started getting tired of people, you know what I'm saying, when it comes to a guy like Kevin Durant, when it comes to a guy like LeBron James, when they win championships based on being on a super team, we penalize them, right? But why don't we do the same thing to Wade? Now, true, you could argue, well, why do you have Stephen Curry top 15 too raw if he benefited from 2 of those 4 championships playing with Kevin Durant? That's a fair point. But he also won 2 of those championships without Kevin Durant. And that last one he won without Kevin Durant or any other real superstar on that team. Whereas Dwyane Wade, 2 of those 3 titles came when he was playing with a prime LeBron James, a prime Chris Bosh, a prime Chris Bosh. And then the other championship, of course, came when he was playing with not prime, but all-star level still Shaquille O'Neal. So I think that he should be penalized a little bit too for winning rings on a super team. Now, Dwyane Wade, weaknesses. First thing I tend to think of is that he wasn't a great 3-point shooter. He wasn't a great 3-point shooter. Sometimes his great play did not always translate to team success in Miami. It didn't. Sometimes, Wade could be averaging 27 a game, even 30 a game, when he was Flash in his prime, late 2000s. But it wasn't translating all the time to team success. Now, I get it. That was also an era where you had some of the top tier teams in the East being, the Cavaliers or the Magic or the Celtics. I get that part. I'm not saying that Miami should have won championships. I just thought that they should have won a little bit more than what they did. But I thought that was another weakness of Dwyane Wade's. When he was Flash, he didn't really have, other than what I mentioned, he was a pretty complete player. That's about it. That's about it. What I want to say with him. The main thing was, what I'm saying, he was not a good outside shooter. So after that, at number 34, I had Rick Barry. Now, Rick Barry, of course, one of the great scorers and great shooters of his era. Rick Barry was a guy that, of course, won the first championship for the Warriors in Golden State. Well, since they became the Golden State Warriors, he won their first championship in 1975. Prior to that, they won 2 championships, 1947 and 1956, when they were playing in Philadelphia. All right. Rick Barry, of course, played in the ABA, and he's the only person in basketball history to lead the league in scoring in the NCAA, the ABA, and the NBA. All right, so he was a phenomenal basketball player. Weaknesses. Earlier on in his career, he was not a great ball handler. He was good, but not great. All right. And as a consequence, even though we don't see the numbers because they weren't counting them yet, I would suspect Rick Barry was averaging a lot of turnovers prior to his entry into the ABA. Then when he went to the ABA, because they had, compared to the NBA, especially by the early 70s, they had such superior guard play that it forced, through repetition of going against his talent, it forced Rick Barry to become a better ball handler, to the point where he was a much improved ball handler when he came back to the NBA in 1973, to the point where he often played point forward, even though it wasn't until Marquise Johnson with the Milwaukee Bucks we first heard that term, point forward. But Rick Barry was probably the first guy to really play that position. So there's that with Rick Barry. Even though Rick Barry was a phenomenal shooter, with any jump shooter, you're going to have off nights. And as a consequence of that, Rick Barry was a streaky shooter. He was around 44% from the floor, too. So there were some nights when Rick Barry was like the greatest shooter in the world. And there were some nights where Rick Barry looked like he might have forgotten how to shoot a basketball. Those nights didn't happen often, but it happens to the best of them, So that of course, was a weakness for Rick Barry. He was not a great defender, although he did have a knack for getting steals, but he was not a great one-on-one defender. Also, he was an asshole. He was an asshole who did not get along with teammates. He didn't get along with most of his fans. He didn't get along with the media. He had a habit of saying some of the most ridiculous shit that you've ever heard. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I said. He was egotistical. And sometimes his attitude could sour the team chemistry. You know what I'm saying? So those are some bad things when it comes to a guy like Rick Barry, right? Phenomenal player, but flawed. So after Rick Barry, of course, at number 35, you have Kawhi Leonard. Now, Kawhi Leonard, of course, when you talk about his weaknesses, the first thing that pops up is his inability to stay healthy and play games. I mean, he's essentially the closest thing we've had to Bill Walton in our era, and I'm not saying about that from a positive perspective. I mean, Kawhi Leonard has missed a shitload of games. I mean, a shitload. I mean, he's still not even at 15,000 career points. Giannis passed that seasons ago. So that gives you an idea of how often Kawhi Leonard's been hurt. And the only thing about that unnecessarily, as far as, or I shouldn't say unnecessarily, but the worst thing about that, unfortunately, is that as you get older, you're going to get hurt more often, probably. So, that's just going to be a knock on Gil. That's always going to be a knock on Kawhi Leonard, is that he got hurt a lot. You know what I'm saying? And not just that he got hurt, but also the knock that he's purposely missing games as far as some grand long-term strategy to stay healthy, which a lot of people see as weak. They see it as weak as applesauce. You're tanking games because you think the fewer games you play during the regular season, the more games you can play during the playoffs, but that has not really worked out. So, there's that. Then, offensively, Kawhi Leonard is a great shooter. He's patterned his game after, Wizards Jordan, as far as the basics is concerned. or older Kobe as far as the basics are concerned. But the problem is, Kawhi Leonard did not have that freakish athleticism that a Michael Jordan had. He didn't have that sneaky quickness and explosiveness that Kobe Bryant had. I'm not saying he wasn't an athlete in some way or shape or form, but he just wasn't as explosive. And as he's gotten older, he's lost a lot of that explosiveness. So, as a consequence of that, he's no longer a guy averaging 27 to 30 points a game. He's now more of a guy that's averaging 23, 24, 25 points a game max. He's not the defender that he once was, but at one point in time, he was a defensive player of the year level type player who once led the league in steals. He's still good, but not what he once was. And he also no longer seems capable of going long stretches of carrying whatever franchise he's playing with, like the Clippers. You know, when he was with the Raptors, when healthy, Kawhi Leonard could carry that team consistently. Now, I think it's more like if he gets into a groove, he can have a stretch of games where he's playing phenomenal, but he needs more help now. You know what I'm saying? So that's my thing with Kawhi Leonard. And also, he's a diva. And, you know, he's part of this generation of players who sometimes like they don't give a shit. At number 36, I have Scottie Pippen, 6-time NBA champion with the Chicago Bulls. Where do I begin for his weaknesses? Insecure about his legacy. The media played a role in that, I would say. Offensively, he was not bad for his era, but he was never a guy that developed a knockdown mid-range shot, and he was inconsistent with his shot. Although he got better, but he was inconsistent with his shot. He was an inconsistent three-point shooter, but yet, interestingly enough, he was one of the first volume three-point shooters I saw in the NBA. He took a lot, especially starting around 1995 or so. He started taking a large quantity of three-point shots. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that a younger Scottie Pippen, when the game was a little bit more open, was more of a slasher. And as a consequence of that, when he was more of a slashing, driving to the basket type player, he used to shoot around 49, 50% from the floor because a lot of his buckets were coming in transition. But as he got older and the game slowed down a little bit in the mid to late 90s, and those lanes weren't as open as they once were, he was forced to become more of a jump shooter. He started shooting more from bobbing away from outside, which I think the best he ever shot from outside, I think, was 37%. Usually he was around 33, 34, 35%, so that's not great. Wasn't a great foul shooter. Offensively, Scottie could also, he never really forced things offensively. So Scottie was a guy that played within his own comfort zone. So that usually meant that he was going to give you, when Michael Jordan was there in his prime, Scottie was going to give you 19, 20, 21 points, 7 rebounds, 6 or 7 assists, 2 steals, right? So when Michael Jordan retired, a lot of us Bull fans thought, well, damn, because there was all this hoopla about Scottie being, you know, a little bit held back by Mike, right? So we thought, man, Scottie will come out here and average 27. Scottie averaged exactly 1 more point than he did the year before. 1 more point. So that's when we said to ourselves, okay, yeah, Scottie's not what people make him out to be. He's good, but he's not as good as people make him out to be. And not only that, Scottie Pippen's just lost his goddamn mind in recent years, you know what I'm saying? Just saying outlandish shit And, those are his weaknesses. Dominique Wilkins. And yeah, I have Dominique Wilkins ahead of Scottie Pippen because if you watched him play, you would know that if Michael Jordan was playing with Dominique Wilkins instead of Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan won 8 or 9 titles. Okay, Dominique Wilkins scored over 26,000 points in the NBA. 1986 NBA scoring champion. Was the first successful athlete to overcome an Achilles rupture, which he suffered, I think it was in January of 1992. And weaknesses for Dominique Wilkins. Could shot Jack some. Definitely. He could shot Jack. And because of that, he could have some bad shooting nights. I remember sometimes looking into the box score back in the day with Dominique Wilkins, and it wasn't uncommon to see something like 11 for 30, or 7 for 24. It wasn't uncommon to see that. He was a guy that shot about 46% from the floor for his career, which, considered in that era, a lot of players like him were shooting more around 48 to 50%. He took some bad shots sometimes. He forced some bad shots. So that's one thing I'll say about Dominique Wilkins. He could force some bad shots. He was also not a great defensive player, which I think if he played with Michael Jordan and played under Phil Jackson, and I think he would have definitely improved on that angle, on that side of the ball. But it is what it is. We're just talking about what we think and what we observe with those players from their actual careers. And also, Dominique was not a great passer or facilitator. He just wasn't. He was an average rebounder for his size and athletic stature. And that's about it off the top of my head as far as weaknesses when it comes to Dominique the Human Highlight Wilkins. And number 38, I got John Stockton. So I got a lot of people who are all-time greats in this little ranking profile right here. At number 38, I got John Stockton, the all-time leader in assists, the all-time leader in steals. Played in Utah for 19 seasons, I believe it is. Appeared in 2 NBA Finals, 1997 and 1998. Both times come within a game of winning an NBA championship. Actually 2 games of winning an NBA championship. Weaknesses for John Stockton. Somewhat undersized. Okay. I'm tempted to say not a great scorer, right? I'm tempted to say that. But it's like how I tell people, Stockton's from the old school. He was taught to play the point guard position the way it was formatted to be played during his era, okay? Which was to be the floor general, run the offense, and go out there and, primarily set up others offensively. But when all else fails, then you might have to go out there and do what you got to do offensively. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, his role was to set up others, in particular, number 1, Karl Malone. And I'm going to tell you something. Usually, when Karl Malone had a big night, John Stockton had a big night too. Because they needed each other. So the weakness I'll say is Whenever John Stockton had a bad night, oftentimes Karl Malone had a bad night. You know what I'm saying? If Karl was in rhythm and Karl was getting into rhythm from John's pinpoint passes, you know what I'm saying, off the pick and roll, then, you know what I'm saying, that helped to elevate John Stockton's game. If Stockton wasn't going offensively, then and you know, even though they didn't rely on Stockton offensively, but if Stockton was bricking, then that usually allowed the defense to hone in on Karl Malone, and he would struggle more often. So they definitely needed one another. So I would say weaknesses in that instance for John Stockton is needed Karl Malone to be offensively dominant for him to win. He needed him because Malone was the only guy on that team that really could carry them consistently. Don't get me wrong, Stockton could have his moments, but Malone was the main guy. Stockton wasn't athletic. Stockton didn't have the greatest handles, you know, as far as how we look at the game today. He wasn't flashy. He didn't have great one-on-one moves. He didn't have the Euro step. He didn't have any of that modern flavor with his game. You know what I'm saying? But he did, and what he did do is implement all of the major aspects of the game before him. He was probably also Stockton. I would say he and Magic Johnson were the two best pure passers I've ever seen. And Stockton could run a fast break and put the ball and play in a perfect position every time. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's kind of hard, man. It's kind of hard for me to say about Stockton because I don't want to look at him through the lens of a modern day point guard. He was a bit dirty as a player too. He was dirty, but he got away with it. Number 39, Jason Kidd. And with Jason Kidd, I would say weaknesses was initially, especially his career, his jump shot. He did not really have much of a jump shot, especially the first maybe 4-5 years of his career, especially with the Dallas Mavericks. First couple of years. Matter of fact, they used to say his name was Ace and Kidd because he didn't have a J. And didn't really have a three-point shot either, which is something that he developed over the years, you know, that sort of top of the key. He used to oftentimes shoot it during fast break situations. And I think I really first started seeing him shoot that shot when he was with the Nets. But man, when it came to elevating average teams, when it came to getting guys in position to be effective on the floor and getting the ball to guys where they would be effective on the floor, setting them up without the defense catching on to it initially. Jason Kidd might have been the very best. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, he wasn't a great offensive player. Never was. And but it didn't matter It didn't matter because, like I said, back in those days, you still appreciated pass first point guards and how they would elevate teams like a John Stockton. And at number 40, I have Bob Cousy. Now, I was tempted to put Bob Cousy higher than that because of his championships, right? I think Bob Cousy had 6 championships with the Boston Celtics. But he did benefit from playing on those Bill Russell Celtics teams. So if I'm kind of penalizing other players for having played on great teams, then why not do the same thing for Bob Cousy? Plus, Bob Cousy did play in the 50s, right? He did win an MVP award. So that does mean something, man. And I think because of that and his contributions to the games, you know what I'm saying, I think he should always be a top 50 all-time player. You know, as far as weaknesses with Bob Cousy, for whatever reason, he was an extremely inefficient shooter. Even by the standards of the 1950s, he was inefficient. I think he shot like 37% from the floor for his career, which, to be honest with you, is not great at all. Turnover prone. He was turnover prone, even though they didn't really, count those. They didn't count turnovers back when he played. And before Bill Russell arrived, Bob Cousy and the Celtics had the success rate of maybe like a team like James Harden and the Rockets. They were far from a dynasty before Bill Russell got there. Put it like that. So, yeah, they were not the same team without Bill Russell. And Bob Cousy was a great individual player, but, the NBA also allowed him to do certain shit that other players weren't allowed to do. You know what I'm saying? As far as they relaxed some of the rules with Bob Cousy as far as him letting him being able to handle the basketball certain ways they didn't let other players do. You know what I'm saying? Or allow other players to maneuver certain or perform certain basketball tricks, or you know what I'm saying? They allow him to do certain things that they didn't let other guys do. Part of that was he was a star or whatever, but I mean, it is what it is. So I'm kind of struggling with some of these guys as far as thinking about their weaknesses because it's not talked about as much. So I'm having to think more about them. There's probably some stuff I'm missing too. But anyway, damn, I let this video go too long. I don't usually talk this long. Shit. But anyway, tell me what you guys think, man. I know y'all don't agree with this goddamn list more than like you. Probably say, well, I don't have this guy higher, that guy higher. But tell me what you guys think.